I spent years building a life that Theo Fontaine treated like his personal ATM, bleeding my savings dry to fuel his delusions of grandeur. I played the dutiful wife while he grew bolder, eventually using my deepest secrets as leverage to keep me in line. He thought he owned my future, but he didn't realize I was quietly weaving a web around him that would leave him with nothing at all. This is how I finally took my power back. The salt spray from the Atlantic stung my eyes as I scrubbed the grit off my camera lens on the jagged Icelandic shoreline. The wind howled, carrying the sharp tang of brine and rotting kelp, but the only thing that mattered was the sheer, raw beauty of the coastline, a scene I knew would sell for a fortune in high-end print journals. Years of careful saving, plus a small trust my grandmother left me, had finally given me breathing room, a cushion Theo hadn't factored into his calculations. That evening, back in our cramped apartment, the smell of stale beer replaced the sea air. Theo sat on the sofa, eyes glazed and bloodshot, tossing my framed photography awards onto the coffee table like worthless scrap. "I need 3,000, Colette," he slurred, his voice thick and demanding as it had become over the last few months. "It's just a temporary bridge loan to get me into that consultancy project." I watched him, my heart sinking at the familiarity of the script. "That's half of next year's Kyrgyzstan fund, Theo. You promised you'd find work this month." Bianca had been right to push me toward Evelyn Reed, knowing a good lawyer was as crucial as having reliable gear in the field. I already had a secure app for documenting everything, recommended by Bianca after an incident with a former colleague. He stood up, stumbling slightly, and grabbed my shoulders with hands that felt cold and heavy. "It's not just your money, it's our investment." He gripped my arm tighter, his eyes searching mine as if trying to find a crack in my resolve. "Don't be selfish. You have plenty of success coming your way." I watched him take my credit card from the table, the plastic clicking against his wedding ring. He didn't see a theft, he saw a right. The weight of his grip on my shoulders lingered long after Theo stumbled into the bedroom. I sat in the silence, the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock amplifying my jagged breathing. A week later, humidity clung to the air as I met Bianca at a small cafe. She pushed a cup of tea toward me, her knuckles white against the ceramic. "He's not just investing, Colette," she whispered, sharp and urgent over the espresso machine's hum. I saw those bank statements on the counter. "Not consultancy fees. He's gambling away your career." I tried to defend him. "A rough patch," I said, "a misunderstanding," but Bianca wasn't having it. "He doesn't see you as a partner, Colette," she insisted. "A resource to be mined until there's nothing left." She reached for my hands, her grip firm. "Last night, he hinted he'd find other ways to ensure your success was shared if you didn't fund the Kyrgyzstan trip. He knows how much power he has over your reputation." I stayed silent for a long beat, watching the way her hands shook against mine. I hadn't answered her right then, but now I realized Bianca wasn't just warning me, she was offering support. "It's like he doesn't see my work as mine," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Bianca squeezed my hand. "You're brilliant, Colette, and you deserve to protect that, to build something real for yourself." She paused, her gaze intense. "Don't let him dim your light. Don't let him take control." For the first time in months, a flicker of resolve ignited within me, a cold, sharp determination to reclaim what was mine. I knew then that things had to change. The steam from my tea rose in a thin, dancing coil between us, but I couldn't focus on it. Bianca's warning echoed in my ears. He saw me not as a partner, but as a resource. That cold assessment had sunk deep, heavier than any shouted demand for money. For months, I'd navigated around his needs, hoping to appease him with success. But now, the fear began to crystallize into resolve. It wasn't just about the finances anymore, it was about control. I didn't answer Bianca right then. Instead, I went home and sat in the dark of my studio, the only light coming from the glow of my laptop. The Kyrgyzstan expedition loomed, my dream project, potentially a turning point. But Theo viewed it solely as another source of funds, an extension of his reach. The next evening, he found me cataloging images at our dining table, a glass of deep red wine in his hand. The house smelled of roasted garlic and expensive floor wax. He didn't appear angry or demanding. That was the unsettling part. He tossed his phone onto the linen tablecloth. "A few murmurs have reached my ears regarding your extracurricular activities," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Apparently, a protest you attended years ago is resurfacing on some obscure online forum." He leaned forward, candlelight dancing in his pupils. "It's causing concern with gallery contacts. A bit of a distraction, wouldn't you agree?" He didn't blink as he waited for my reaction. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. The amount wasn't what stung, it was the casual weaponization of my past. "How much?" I asked, keeping my voice even. 10,000 should cover the removal. "A standard administrative fee to smooth things over." He smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Otherwise, those contacts might start questioning your judgment, and consequently, the value of your work." I nodded slowly, playing the role of a wife momentarily panicked. But behind my carefully constructed facade, I was already logging every word in an encrypted app on my phone, date-stamped, time-locked. He believed he held all the cards, but I was quietly building a counter-narrative. It wasn't about conceding, it was about documentation. A week later, I stepped into the hushed, white-walled sanctuary of Julian Prescott's gallery. The air smelled of linseed oil and polished marble. He stood among a collection of oversized landscapes, hands folded behind his back. "Your portfolio is strong, Colette," he said, his voice echoing slightly against the high ceilings. "Though there's been some external chatter, naturally. Every emerging artist attracts attention." I looked at him, my pulse spiking only marginally. He wasn't threatening me with it. He was acknowledging its existence and waiting to see how I handled it. "I anticipated that," I told him, sliding a tablet across a marble plinth. "Everything is being managed legally." Julian glanced down at the screen, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to ask what it contained. He understood perfectly. The gallery wasn't just about showcasing art. It was about protecting reputations, and in this case, recognizing a quiet strength beneath the surface. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, not simply reacting to Theo's demands. "I showed him my private records," I told Julian, sliding the tablet across the stone surface. "And my legal team is overseeing the transition." Julian's eyes narrowed as he swiped through my images, the raw, haunting textures of the Kyrgyz wild. He didn't look at me once during those 3 minutes. He was looking at the work. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. "The question isn't just about the quality of your lens, Colette. It's about who owns the narrative." That conversation lingered as months passed and a new kind of tension settled over our house. My upcoming expedition to find the snow leopards wasn't simply a project anymore, it was a battleground. I'd meticulously funneled funds into secure accounts, building a financial buffer Theo didn't know existed. It hadn't been easy, diverting earnings and quietly renegotiating contracts with Julian's help, but it was essential for escaping his grip. The storm broke one evening, not with rain, but with fury. I found him in the living room, papers scattered across the coffee table like fallen leaves. He'd clearly been searching, pulling files, emptying drawers, a frantic energy radiating off him. The air smelled of damp wool and desperation. "Where is it, Colette?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. "Don't play coy. I checked the joint accounts. The expedition fund, it's not all there." I braced myself against the cool marble of the fireplace mantel, forcing my hands to remain still. "The funds are allocated for logistics, Theo. Permits, guides, specialized equipment. Don't insult me," he spat, advancing on me like a predator. You think I'm blind. You think you can siphon off money into some secret account without me noticing? He grabbed my wrist, not with the casual possessiveness of before, but with frantic desperation. I know about your little arrangement with Julian Prescott, about Evelyn Reed sniffing around asking questions. You've been building a case against me. His face was contorted, disbelief warring with anger. It wasn't the money he was truly furious about, it was the loss of control. The realization that I hadn't been a passive resource for years, that I'd been strategically preparing an escape route, had shattered his carefully constructed illusion of dominance. I thought we were partners, he choked out, his grip loosening slightly. After everything, you've been planning this all along? The expedition is happening, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. With or without your approval. His eyes widened for a fleeting moment, not with rage now, but with something akin to panic. He'd miscalculated, believing he held the power over me through finances and reputation. Now, confronted with my resolve, and the evidence of his own actions backing it up, he stood exposed. You think you can just leave? I already have, I replied quietly. Evelyn has a restraining order ready to serve, and Detective Harding is very interested in hearing about the administrative fees you've been demanding. The gallery air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax. I stood in the center of the room, my spine straight, watching the crowd move through my images of the Kyrgyz wilderness. The walls were a curated sanctuary of silence and snow. It felt like my first real breath in years. Colette! These are breathtaking. A woman in a silk gown hovered near the centerpiece, but my eyes drifted toward the entrance. The heavy glass doors swung open with a jarring thud. The ambient hum of cello music seemed to skip a beat as Theo shoved through the crowd. He looked unraveled, his suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his face twisted into a mask of desperate fury. I'd known this moment was coming. Bianca had warned me he wouldn't accept losing control gracefully. Colette! He bellowed, ignoring the shocked gasps from the nearby patrons. We need to talk about the contracts. We need to settle this right now. He surged toward me, his hand reaching out as if to grab my arm like he had at our front door. He didn't see the man in the charcoal suit stepping into his path. Mr. Fontaine, Evelyn, my lawyer, stepped forward with a cold, practiced smile. She held a thick folder of documents. You are currently in violation of a standing restraining order and are accused of several counts of financial extortion. Theo froze, his hand hovering in midair. What is this? Get out of my way. I'm afraid I can't do that, Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. The authorities have been briefed on your history of harassment and the evidence of your extortion attempts regarding my client's career. Before he could roar back, 2 officers in plain clothes moved toward him. The crowd parted like a physical wave. Step back from the lady, one officer commanded, his hand firm on Theo's shoulder. This is my wife. Theo screamed, but the word wife fell flat and hollow as he was steered toward the exit. He tried to kick out, his shoes scuffing against the polished floor, until they escorted him into the hallway where his voice echoed one last time, muffled by the heavy doors. The silence that followed was absolute for a heartbeat before a woman near me gasped. Was that your husband? I looked at Julian, who stepped beside me. He nodded once. The memory of a cold November day in college resurfaced, a student protest against university funding cuts, my voice raw with conviction as I marched alongside other students. Theo had dismissed it then as youthful idealism. Now, he'd weaponized that very act of conscience to try and discredit me. It hadn't worked. Julian had done his due diligence, understood the context. My commitment to social justice was irrelevant to my art. I didn't answer the woman. I just took a sip of water, the cool liquid settling my shaking hands. I wasn't his victim anymore. The snow leopards on the walls felt like silent witnesses to my liberation, their wild spirit mirroring the freedom I had finally claimed. So tell me, did I do the right thing, or should I have walked away sooner? Let me know in the comments. This was Savage Lessons. Subscribe so you never miss the next comeuppance, and drop a comment with your verdict. Was justice served, or not far enough?